So the Focus Mark 1, in terms of how it drives, the first thing you notice is how compliant and controlled it is. The steering should be light, direct. The suspension should be pretty comfortable. Matheson strut suspension has its limits, but it should be pretty comfortable. Shouldn't feel uncomfortable in any manner really whatsoever. Obviously, on the standard models, you get quite soft springs. Even on this Z-Tech with supposedly stiffer springs, it can be a little bit more wallowy. But it shouldn't feel uncontrolled. It should feel grippy and pointy and direct. It should feel like it's on rails half the time. Every single model should feel like that, regardless of whether it's a CL model or an ST170. In terms of what you're looking for when you're driving a Focus, you shouldn't have any bangs, rattles, clunks. It should all be very nice indeed. If there is any knocks from the front of the car, it's usually ball joints. It can also be drop links, which is quite a common thing down the years. The rear suspension, again, if there's any clunks, it could be a bush, but most likely it's the drop links at the end of the rear anti-roll bar. Acceleration should be nice and brisk, particularly in the manual gearboxes. The automatic gearboxes should be nice and smooth for all the gears, and they should move off quite nicely. There shouldn't be any sort of delay whatsoever really. It should be quite responsive to throttle positions. A little known feature of the gearbox itself, the automatic gearbox, is that it has shock absorbers within the valve body itself. They're called accumulators, but really they're shock absorbers. They absorb the shock between first and second, and when switching between neutral drive gear ratios. So there should be no harsh jerking whatsoever. Particularly for the petrol engines, they are flat tappet engines. They are not hydraulic actuated. So it's something to be aware of. So that's why they can be a bit tappety and cold, but they soon quieten down. Yes, that was a slight kick down. It wasn't a full kick down, but automatic gearbox is nice and responsive. In the manual models, the clutch biting point should be relatively in the middle. It shouldn't be too high or too low. If it's too high, it could be the fact that the gearbox fluid hasn't been changed. I've seen that on quite a few cars. The gear change is a cable. Back in the day, that was slightly new to most people who are used to rod gear changes, but it's something people have become used to, and it's fairly progressive. If not slightly numb. The brakes should be nice and firm, not spongy. They're quite nicely assisted by a nice remote servo. Let's see if I can actually do brake. Nice and responsive. And this model has the drum brakes at the back. It is desirable for disc brake models or disc brake conversions, so that may have been done to the car, but it requires an awful lot of parts to swap over. Realistically, on the automatic models in particular, why would you want disc brakes at the back? You won't feel a difference. The performance isn't amazing, but it's okay. Do a wiper test. Now this is really important. The wiper blades, if they judder, it could be old wiper blades, but it could also be ball joints in the wiper linkage. They can go, and if they do go properly, the wiper wiper linkage could actually pop out and you lose wipers, and it's always when it's raining at the time you most need it. So if there's any juddering, find out whether it's just old blades that need replacing, because if it isn't, it could be the ball joints in the linkage. This is quite a challenging road, as they say, and it should be quite compliant on the road. The interior cabin noise should be not intrusive. They didn't give a lot of sound deafening on these cars. I don't have sound deafening under the bonnet, so I can hear the engine quite a little bit more. They did put some sound deafening under where my feet are by the pedals, but sound deafening is really lackluster in these early Focuses. It doesn't help the fact that I've removed the carpet liners at the rear, so stones can throw up inside the arch, and it is quite a rattly sound when that happens, but I prefer that to having rust issues. It is something I fully recommend. It's just a nice, pleasurable drive, and that's what these cars are all about, how they drive. People don't exactly like the blobby dashboard. People don't like the blobby, tall exterior. It's always been a subject of controversy, but then cars that are designed so futuristically tend to have that opinion of them, let's say. But nobody can argue with how a Focus Mark 1 handles. End of. As I said before about the steering, it's sharp, crisp, and the power steering, which is hydraulic still on these models, it's not over assisted, it's not under assisted, it's absolutely weighted perfectly for every occasion you need it, whether that's turning a sharp, a shallow corner, or at parking speeds where some dry steering is required. One thing to note, if you own an automatic Focus Mark 1, you may be very familiar with the sort of very charismatic sounds of the gearbox. They tend to whine quite a bit. That's completely normal. It's quite a nice characteristic of the gearbox in a day where gearboxes are so muffled and so insulated that you can't hear them. They don't make any sound at all. They have no character. There is no distinctive sound or whines or features. I remember a certain Austin Metro with its whiny gearboxing sump underneath the A series. That was virtually unique from first to second. It sounded unlike any gear change ever. The engine will rev freely way up to 4,000, 5,000 RPM. Very peppy engine. The Ford Sigma engine and the Ford Zetec engine. There is actually really no differences in the way they drive. The only differences being slightly more torque and power on the 1.8 2 litre, which are more adverse to performance related driving styles. As I said before in the review, the driving position is slightly on the high side. Even in the lowest position, I'm quite a tall fellow at 6'3", and it feels like I'm sitting on top of the car as opposed to sitting in the car. It's not a bad position to be in. It's comfortable, very comfortable indeed. It's not something really I think twice about. It's quite refreshing. You get into a Focus Mark 2 or Focus Mark 3 in particular, you're sitting quite low down, and the driving position is definitely suited to a more sportier feel. Not to everybody's tastes. Even with very little sound deafening, this car sounds incredibly refined in the cabin. It doesn't get too noisy. The only problem will be on the 1.4 engines is they will get rather coarse beyond 55 miles an hour. You can absolutely understand why this car was used as the basis for Colin McRae's WRC rally car. Yes, people said that the RS is the basis. I get that, but the Focus as itself is. The DNA of the Focus, of a standard normal Focus like this, is exactly what's underneath the skin of the WRC rally car that most people tend to dress an RS up as. I've seen many conversions like that. I'm not surprised. Why wouldn't you? It's an absolutely legendary car, and because of that car, the Focus sold so well. Just get around the corner. Attempting. Pin sharp roundabouts are just delightful, absolutely delightful. If there is any wondering from the rear of the car, the rear train arm bushes will be at fault, guaranteed. When I replaced mine about 2 years ago, the difference was astronomical. The car went from a leering car at the rear to one that actually grips completely, not just at the front but at the rear, and it really does make a difference.